Hey there, as Build 42 starts to creep closer and closer to reality, IndieStone is once again giving us some previews as to what to expect in the gigantic update to Project Zomboid with its latest Thursdoid update. Today we're going to take a closer look at all the things that they mentioned and talk about it for a while. I've been trying to figure out how to unpack the news for you in a way that is clear and concise because there's just so much stuff, and I think that we're going to kind of go backwards in the Thursdoid, touching on what I consider to be more important on a base level before circling back to the technical stuff. All of it's important, just some things interest me more, I guess. So let's get on with it. One of the most anticipated new things for Build 42 is animals, and as you know, with animals are going to come more farming and fishing, and IndieStone has kind of touched on this in the latest Thursdoid with their main developer, Blair Algol. I hope I said his name right, talking about the farming rework. By all accounts, it appears that Blair is finished with the dev phase of new plants, vegetables, herbs, and houseplants, and is at the fine-tuning and polish stage of development. Some of the highlights include crops now taking a more realistic time to grow, and not only that, there will now be growing seasons within each year to grow them, and crops that typically would require to be grown outdoors are going to actually have to be grown outdoors. He did hint at greenhouses possibly being something in the future, but was more tentative about it. Of course, all this stuff can be manipulated or just turned off in the Project Zomboid sandbox. Additionally, new garden pests will be added like slugs and snails along with the appropriate insecticide, whereas with anything in Zomboid, you can read a magazine to build traps for these pests. Once animals are implemented, you can also do a little pest control the old-fashioned way with chickens or get your herb on by planting rosemary. Of all the things I've learned from Project Zomboid, I would have never guessed that slugs and snails hate rosemary. Thanks, Zomboid. And speaking of herbs and spices, you'll be able to plant these as well, and they will have shorter seasons within the year, but can be repeatedly harvested. In addition to this, some vegetables will be able to be planted directly into the ground to grow new batches of veggies. Think potatoes, onions, garlic, those things that are in the ground already. All of this farming stuff is going to be able to happen using contextual action using the combat stance in conjunction with a key. In other words, it sounds like no more right-clicking to bring up a menu. Instead, if you have a tool in your hand with the right key and combat stance in the right place, your character will automatically start doing its thing. Blair hinted that this would likely be the case for other things such as chopping trees or unbarricading homes. With fishing, it looks like we are starting to get better visuals and more fish to choose from, including perch, crappie, bass, walleye, sunfish, catfish, and gar. Nothing more was really talked about it, but in previous Thursdoids, they have hinted at making fish a mini-game of sorts within the game. Blair also went into some of what he sees as current problems of Build 41 in terms of loot finding, specifically the very rare stuff such as generator magazines, sledgehammers, lighters, and matches, calling these items bottlenecked items in which a player could feel soft-locked if they have trouble finding them. Personally, as someone who has played Zomboid for years and currently only does insanely rare loot runs, I don't see it, but then again, I'm an experienced player, and I can imagine the frustration of a new player who's landlocked because they have a generator but can't find the generator magazine. To tackle this, they're in the process of sprucing up and revising the loot spawn, plus adding additional opportunities for loot via annotated map stash houses. They're also given the ability to possibly finding these items through foraging. As an aside, I've actually found a how-to generator book a month or two back while foraging, so it is indeed in the game even as we talk about it. One of the newer things that will be updated will be the ability to work on generators once you have a high enough electrical skill without the magazine. This is wonderful news as the illiterate trait makes it impossible for a player to utilize gas and power and gives the electrical skill a little more reason to even exist in the player's traits. Finally, Blair talked a bit about what he called themed items and being able to actually attach more things to your belt beyond weapons. He mentions canteens, for instance, as well as a can opener, and finally, it appears as if we'll actually be able to open up cans with knives, but with the possibility of injury, of course. Now to the more technical stuff. As you may know, and game mods have been hugely detrimental to the success of Zomboid, and IndieStone is making it a little bit easier on these unsung heroes by using tags for item interactions and creating new events for modders to use, including on Zombie Create, which will allow modders to directly access zombies when they first spawn in, and Load Chunk, which gives modders access to specific chunks of the world in an 8x8 square grid. They've also moved the order of operations when sandbox options are loaded. None of this means anything to me, but that said, kudos to IndieStone for doing things that will allow the game to continue being the best zombie game ever created. And modders, I love you guys. So we know that basements and underground things are going to be a thing in Build 42, along with increases of height of up to 32 floors, so massive buildings can become a thing, lighting propagation for immersion, and the ability to expand outside the current map parameters. Another thing that they have been working on optimizing the game further by coding in chunk-based rendering using a depth map. I hope I got that right. The more technical part of this Thursdoid focuses on the chunk-based rendering, how things are currently rendered, and how they intend to improve on its current thresholds, which will likely make Zomboid less of a resource hog than it already is and improve FPS as a result. I'm just going to summarize this real quick if technical explanations aren't your thing, partially because I'm really not that technical either. I've been trying to get my head around all of this stuff, and I'm going to try to explain it to you in a explain it to me like I'm 5 kind of explanation. Indystone is basically adding depth rendering, which will allow the game to kind of cheat its way around some of the current limits that 2D games like Zomboid always face, because modern video cards are more suited on rendering depth than 3D games, which is not Zomboid. Depth buffering in 3D games allows you to choose what things get drawn first and what order you choose in a way that is most optimized by your GPU. Plus, the previous frames are likely preserved in your GPU for reuse. But with a 2D game like Zomboid, every tile has to be drawn every frame and every time, which results in much heavier GPU usage and, as a result, lower FPS. Indystone has been working on a fix by servicing the walls and floors as if they are 3D objects, even though they aren't, taking advantage of being able to reorder the tiles as they see fit and optimized and ready to go. As they explain it, all those hundreds of draw calls as the cards get slammed down from the deck now only need to happen once as we construct the chunk and it becomes its very own tile. Within this, we bake the depth information into the depth buffer, so despite this just being a single picture, we already have all the information hidden in it that's required to correctly place any player, zombie, or inventory item on this chunk. The only time we need to update this chunk and redraw those tiles is if lighting from time of day changes, or if a naughty zombie dies on it, or if a player picks up an item, drops an item, opens or closes a door. In other words, what was once 4 to 5 tiles drawn on an 8x8x4 grid is now the equivalent of 1 tile drawn, which sounds like 75% less usage than what we are currently dealing with in Build 41. Well, that does it for the latest Thursdoid update. Be sure to like this video, subscribe if you want, and leave a comment if I totally mucked up the technical explanation. Actually, leave a comment anyway. My name is Drunkonlife. Goodbye.